Mel Gibson at his office, and as of today, he is 2.5 months sober. By the way, no questions were off limits. July 28th.
Yes, a day to remember.
How did that day start?
Much like any other day. I went to work, you know, saw a bunch of people, had a screening, met with a friend of mine. He screened his film for me.
And then what?
Well, of course, I guess I must have been a little overwrought. So, and that's what happens. Too much pressure, too much work. You do things that go against good judgment. So, that's it. A few drinks later, and I was in the back of a police car wailing, so.
A few drinks later, do you know how many?
No, I don't. But I know it was tequila.
How long had you been drinking again?
A couple months. Years go by, you're fine. And then all of a sudden, in a heartbeat, in an instant, on an impulse, somebody shoves a glass of mezcal in front of your nose and says, "It's from Oaxaca." And you go, "What?" And it's burning its way through your esophagus, and you go, "Oh man, what did I do that for? Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube."
Were you drinking from the open bottle of tequila in the car?
Yeah. I had a couple of slugs, yeah.
So how drunk were you?
It's not a question of how drunk you are, or you're impaired. Your judgment is impaired enough to do insane things like try and drive at high speeds. Even a couple of drinks, you lose all humility. Everything is just, you become a braggart, then a blowhard. And
yeah, one of the things you said was about owning Malibu.
Yeah, oh yeah. Right. Yes, I own this place, as I sat in the back of a police car with my hands cupped on.
And then, as the officer arrested him, a tirade against Jews. Take me back to that moment as you remember it then. Officer James Mee.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know him? Did you know he was Jewish?
No, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. I found out later. But that's, you know, all.
Why would you have asked him that?
I don't know. You see, it's all, I didn't know if he was or wasn't. I mean, I said horrible things to him. And he was pretty patient.
These are the words.
Mm-hmm.
How horrible does he think they were? I read to him the officer's account of the words he used that night. Expletive Jews. And to Officer Mee, "Are you a Jew?" And the Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Are those anti-Semitic words?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Sounds horrible. And I'm ashamed of that. That came out of my mouth. And I'm not that. That's not who I am, you know. We
have a world in which alcohol is used to excuse behavior.
It's always, well, alcohol is used to kill pain. And it is no excuse, by the way. It's not a good enough excuse.
If the police officer had been black...
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Maybe. I don't know.
What would you have said?
Who knows? I'd have to get loaded again and tell you. And then be in those conditions again. Because it's unpredictable what's going to come flying out. At the police station, still angry, he said to a female sergeant, "What do you think you're looking at?" Adding a reference to her breasts.
I've heard people say, you know, "I am a angry drunk." Fill in the blank. I am a
happy drunk until I snap for no reason and just turn.
Where does this anger come from?
I have no idea. Just I've been angry all my life. And I try not to have it manifest itself, you know. You try and keep a lock on it. And it really isn't, it's real back there someplace. And, you know, I've talked to people about that. Like, where is it coming from, this anger? And I can get really mad about, I can murder inanimate objects. You should see me choking the toaster in the morning. You know, so I'm kind of a work in progress right now. So you got me a little green. See? I mean, I just got out of the straitjacket with the messy hair and everything. So.
The mugshot.
Yeah, the mugshot. The first thing that went through my mind was like Nick Nolte's photograph. So I did my best with a finger combing in the water fountain to sort of like splash a little water on my face to not take one of those hideous mugshots. Because I knew it would be around. So, vanity won out. You know. The first time Gibson was arrested drunk was 1984 after rear-ending a car. He entered AA in 1991. But he has talked about his suicidal despair at relapsing. His family has had to endure it all.
And this time, the added horror of watching the news about the bigoted words.
Oh, I just went home, and some of my kids were there, and, you know, I talked to them for a little bit, and it was a little rough that morning. So I chased it down with a few cold ones, you know, in the full knowledge.
That morning?
Oh, yeah. It was kind of unbearable to face. So it was something I thought, well, this is it. This will be the end of it, but I just have to get through this morning, you know.
But wait a minute. You talked to your kids while you were slugging down more to get through it?
You're not operating well, but, you know, you have to do something. And, I mean, I wasn't sort of, you know, flashing in front of them or anything, but...
What do you say? Is I'm sorry?
Yeah, you do. I've apologized more than anyone I know, so it's getting old. And
how long's your list of apologies necessary?
Oh, huge. For my whole life.
How did you tell your wife?
I just told her, you know, straight out. Slipped again, yeah. And she was like, of course, you know, she doesn't like that. But she was, you know, gracious, compassionate.
Her name is Robin. They have been married 26 years and have 7 children.
You said once that she gets the medals.
Yeah,
because
sure.
She is the one who hopes.
Yeah. She hopes, she bears the brunt, and it's no different this time, so there you have it.
How many times can you ask her?
Boy, I don't know. Good question. I don't know the answer to it.
He says the torment is every time that you relapse, it's harder to fight your way back.
The risk of everything, life, limb, family, is not enough to keep you from it. That's the hell of it. You are indefensible against it. If your nature is
you
one
will
of alcoholism,
sacrifice
anything. So you must keep that under arrest, in a sense, but you cannot do it of yourself. And people can help, yeah, but it's God. You got to go there. You got to do it, or you won't survive. That's all there is to it. Look, this whole experience, in a way, for me, I'm sort of viewing it now as a kind of a blessing, because...
A blessing?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I got stopped before I did any real damage to anyone else. Thank God for that. I didn't hurt myself. You know, I didn't leave my kids fatherless. That's good. That's a blessing, okay? The other thing is, sometimes you need a cold bucket of water in the face to sort of snap to. Because you're dealing with a sort of a malady of the soul, an obsession of the mind, and a physical allergy. And some people need a big tap on the shoulder. In my case, public humiliation on a global scale seems to be what was required.
Humiliation for him, outrage from others, and a lot of questions about alcohol revealing who you really are.
People say alcohol just liberates you to say what you really feel. It's what you really feel. It's not changing.
Well, that's patently false, I think, because it's like alcohol loosens your tongue and makes you act, say, and behave in a way that is not you.
Somebody said, I do not believe tequila can turn an unbiased person into a raging anti-Semite. Alcohol removes inhibitions in vino veritas.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the old Roman saying, in vino veritas, yeah. Well, they don't know what they're talking about. That's as simple as that is. Or they don't have the problem and they don't understand it.
Again, there are lots of people who get drunk and don't say anti-Semitic things.
Oh, yes, there are. People say all sorts of horrible things.
No, but who
about anything. And not just anti-Semitic things. They say horrendous things. They say to their parents, I hate you and I want you to die. And, you know, I mean, they don't mean that stuff. It's the stuff that comes out when you're loaded it's extreme.
But if it's not in you, is it going to come out?
It has to have some kind of place somewhere. And you have to ask, where is it coming from? Where is it coming from?
And that is exactly where we will begin tomorrow.
So he admits they were bigoted statements. He admits that they were in him. Tomorrow we debate where they came from. It is a phenomenon of American life that a Hollywood actor and director has become the fulcrum for a discussion of some of the toughest issues in American society. For instance, do you give the same weight to an anti-Semitic tirade while drunk as anti-Semitism while sober? And since Gibson acknowledged yesterday that even if you are drunk, the words have to come from someplace inside you, where? In the past 2 months, he's been sober in AA meetings 5 days a week, and he says he's begun a series of conversations, starting with Jewish people closest to him and some community leaders, more to come. He says he genuinely wants to learn why that night he committed what he calls the sin of bigotry.
As everyone knows, Mel Gibson is devoutly religious, which is what inspired him to make The Passion of the Christ. His church is a Catholic splinter group called Traditionalist Catholics, who feel the modern Catholic Church has abandoned the real faith. His father, 88-year-old Hutton Gibson, is well known for his writings attacking the Vatican. The Traditionalist Church believes in the Latin Mass and literal reading of the Bible. And Gibson has talked about a war of biblical proportion, though he says no one can say when it will happen or where. Which brings us back to the night of July 28th, and what he says may have been in his mind as he drunkenly said Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world.
Now, maybe it was just that very day that Lebanon and Israel were at it. Now,
it was the 17th day of the raging war in Lebanon, and there were a lot of people worrying that the crisis was escalating out of control.
Since I was a kid, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, now in the new millennium, you can read of an ever-escalating kind of conflagration over there in the Middle East. I remember thinking when I was 20, man, that place is going to drag us all into the black hole, you know? Just the difficulty over there. And you start thinking, will I ever see my grandchildren grow up, you know? What's going to become of the world? Who's going to press the button? And that's fear-related, okay? So, you know, you have your own fears about these things.
But there's a difference between saying that place is a tinderbox and the constellation of things happening there could take us all down, and saying the Jews are responsible for all the wars.
Well, I did say that.
The Jews are responsible.
Well, strictly speaking, that's not true, because it takes two to tango.
What are the Jews responsible for?
What are they responsible for? I think that they're not blameless in the conflict. There's been aggression and retaliation and aggression. It's just part of being in conflict and being at war. So they're not blameless. Of course they're not. Okay, now when you're loaded, you know, the balance of how you see things, it comes out the wrong way. I know that it's not as black and white as that. I know that you just can't, you know, roar about things like that. That it's wrong.
A lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, he's still blaming the Jews.
No, but I didn't say that.
He's still blaming Israel.
No. Did I say that?
After several rounds on the Middle East, he said this is his statement of his true feelings.
All right, let me be real clear here, in sobriety, sitting here in front of you, national television, that I don't believe that Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. I mean, that's an outrageous, drunken statement.
So was something else eating at him that night. He says he has also realized he had been harboring an old resentment.
And the other place it may have come from is, you know, as you know, a couple of years ago I released the film The Passion. Now, even before anyone saw a frame of film, for an entire year, I was subjected to a pretty brutal sort of public beating. And during the course of that, I think I probably had my rights violated in many different ways as an American, you know, as an artist, as a Christian, just as a human being, you know.
It was the movie that became a kind of Rorschach test. Gibson and tens of millions of Christians who saw the film say it was simply evoking the New Testament version of Jews, Romans, and the brutal crucifixion of Jesus. But the leaders of several Jewish organizations launched a campaign arguing that Gibson had seeded the film with deliberately anti-Semitic images. And they warned that Gibson might be inciting a new wave of hatred, even violence against Jews. He says that never happened.
The film came out, it was released, and you could have heard a pin drop, you know. Even the crickets weren't chirping. But the other thing I never heard was one single word of apology. I thought I dealt with that stuff, all forgiveness, but the human heart's a funny thing. Sometimes you can bear the scars of resentment, and it'll come out, you know, when you're overwrought and you take a few drinks. So,
is there hate in your heart? Is there anger in your heart?
There was anger from that, I think, because I felt that I was unjustly treated. My resentment stemmed from certain individuals treating me in a certain way.
But we ask about those people he thought should apologize to him. Can they now argue they were right about what he is inside?
Can you say anti-Semitic things and not be anti-Semitic? Can you say intolerant things and not be an intolerant person?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Because one changes from day to day, and there are different forces exercised on you that may or may not. And people every day say things they don't mean and things they don't feel. They may feel them temporarily. I mean, we're all broken.
And he says he is now learning more about those who were hearing his words. In an earlier apology, he had asked the Jewish community for dialogue and help.
But I heard back that a woman who had read the apology actually wept with relief. Now, that sort of hit me. I was like, relief? Oh my God, she was afraid. She was terrified. And wow, you know, I don't think I realized until like a couple of 5 days later, that what I did was press a big fear button.
You didn't realize that?
I didn't realize the level of fear that was there.
What did you think it was?
Me? It was just the stupid ramblings of a drunkard, you know. And I guess I had to sort of think, well, hang on, it's conceivable that they think I could be the next goose-stepping maniac to come into their neighborhood, you know. I don't know.
But for several years, there has been one other question that has plagued him. The fact that his father, Hutton Gibson, has famously publicly expressed doubts that 6 million Jews were really murdered in the Holocaust.
And the last time I went down this trail,
I bit your head off.
It was 3 years ago in an interview. Mel Gibson began by telling us he does believe 6 million Jews were murdered.
It was an atrocity of monumental proportion.
But when we ask him to repudiate the assertions of his dad...
He's my father. Gotta leave it alone, Diane. Gotta leave it alone.
But I want to go back, because your father has been on the record. This is not an assumption. He has been on the record saying things like the Holocaust, quote, mostly fiction, that it's been hyped out of proportion.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about me here right now, and me taking responsibility for my words and actions. And I'm certainly not going to use him to sort of put anything off of me.
Even if it's the explanation for what happened that night?
It isn't the explanation for what happened that night. It isn't. It has nothing to do with it. It's, that's in my own heart. I was taught that there are good and bad people of any race and creed, you know.
What's the main thing we all need to do to bridge prejudice, bigotry, intolerance?
Have dinner. That's it.
Talk.
Yeah. And here.
But we ask about those in the Hollywood community who say it's too late and he should be ostracized.
What do you feel about them?
Well, I feel sad because, you know, they've obviously been hurt and frightened and offended enough to feel that they have to do that. And it's their choice.
In the meantime, Gibson says he has to go on battling his old demons of rage and alcohol. And hoping, even if there's not a Hollywood ending in sight, that somehow, somewhere, there's at least another chance.
Somebody said to me once, pain is the precursor to change.
Yeah, who said that? Socrates?
In fact, it was Gibson himself.
How ashamed have you been?
Oh, quite ashamed, yeah. And it's you know, that's the price you pay, because sometimes it's what you need. Many people have reached out. My goodness, I mean, I've been overwhelmed, almost choked me. So overwhelmed by the response of friends, family, and you know, even the Jewish community. I mean, the letters and the stuff that came in were really encouraging. Sort of broke my heart a little bit. So it's like they understood. There's a lot of compassion out there. So that was kind of overwhelming for me. So it was, and I don't want to disappoint anyone again, you know. And what I need to do to heal myself and to be assuring and allay the fears of others, and to heal them if they had any heart wounds from something I may have said. So this is the last thing I want to be, is that kind of monster.
So as we said yesterday, everyone will decide for themselves about Mel Gibson according to their own definitions of repentance, which we looked up, and by the way, at its Latin root means to suffer a deeper pain. A couple of other notes about him, by the way. We asked him if he was going to give some large sums of money to interreligious causes. He said he is earmarking his donations privately. He does not believe in seeking public credit for what you give. And as you may have read, his Holocaust project with Disney was canceled, but he says he may do it somewhere else, and added that he did this interview now because he says he doesn't want this issue ever to be used as publicity for the Disney film he has coming out later this year.